The power of disappearing. Machiavellian silence. Have you ever noticed the rare kind of man who doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't justify? He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't beg to be seen. He doesn't fight for space in your world. He simply withdraws. And when he does, something shifts. The room chills. People grow uneasy. Silence grows loud, louder than any shouted words. That's not weakness. That's not passivity. That is power. Silent, calculated, absolute. Machiavelli knew this intimately. He wrote, "A prince must know how to disappear without losing his influence. Because absence, when intentional, becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, people see more than you. They see their dependence, their entitlement, their discomfort, when they no longer have access to what they once took for granted. They don't fear losing your love. They fear losing their grip on you. They don't miss you. They miss the control they had over you. And if you've been the man who always shows up, always explains, always bends to keep the peace, you haven't been loved. You've been used." In Machiavelli's world, predictability isn't a virtue. It's a trap. A man who is always available is never respected. A man who is never feared is always controlled. You think kindness builds connection, but kindness without boundaries breeds contempt. You become background noise, an emotional butler, always at their service, never at your own. Every time you say yes when silence would have served you better, you sell your dignity for the illusion of being needed. Machiavelli would call that what it is: weakness, disguised as virtue. He would tell you never allow your worth to be measured by your willingness to plead. Because when you're always present, you lose leverage, you lose mystery, you lose scarcity. And scarcity is the bedrock of influence. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to prove your heart, to reassure those who never reassured you, don't react. Disappear. Not as revenge, but as a refinement. To reintroduce yourself not as a servant to their needs, but as a sovereign force, a man whose silence commands more than his voice ever did. Withdrawal is not cowardice, it's evolution. It's the moment you stop chasing and start positioning. When you become unpredictable, unreachable, untouchable. And that's when the world takes notice. Because when you vanish without explanation, they don't wonder where you went. They wonder what power you've discovered that made you stop explaining altogether. If this struck a nerve, write it below. I disappear to reclaim my power. And if you're ready to go further down this path of silent strategy, subscribe, not to follow the noise, but to rise above it. Not to beg for respect, but to become the man who commands it. By vanishing. Part 1. The price of being too easy. Predictability is a trap. If you want to survive in a world ruled by perception, you must abandon the illusion that goodness alone will protect you. The truth is brutal. Being useful is not power. Being predictable is not loyalty. Being always available is the death of respect. From the moment you were born, you were trained to be agreeable. Say yes. Don't make waves. Show up early. Apologize even when you're not wrong. But Machiavelli would smirk at that condition. He didn't believe in moral submission. He believed in power management. If you're always explaining, always accessible, you've already surrendered the throne of your own life. Because the man who makes himself cheap is never treated as rare. You think quick replies show commitment. You think availability builds connection. But what it really builds is expectation, and expectation kills appreciation. Machiavelli saw through this charade. He wrote, "The man who seeks to be loved by all becomes the slave of the ungrateful." Because people don't respect the man who always says yes. They exploit him. And here's how it plays out. They send a message, you respond in seconds. They complain, you explain. They create chaos, you bring peace. You become their crisis manager, their validation machine, their disposable shield against discomfort. But you weren't born to be a buffer for broken people. You were born to build a life ruled by your own values, not their moods. Machiavelli wouldn't comfort you. He would awaken you. He'd say, when they expect you, disappear. When they depend on you, detach. When they assume you're theirs, remind them you belong to no one. Because the man who cannot disrupt expectations will always be ruled by them. You believe that explaining yourself makes you noble, but in the eyes of manipulators, your explanations are confessions. Your transparency is ammunition, and your kindness without boundaries is a leash. So what do? Break the rhythm. Interrupt the pattern. Withdraw without warning. Let them wonder what changed. Let them feel the void they once ignored. Let their comfort with your constant availability collapse under the weight of your new boundaries. This is how you take back control, by replacing predictability with tactical silence, by answering only when it serves you, by remembering that access to your mind, time and energy is not a right. It's a reward. So next time you feel pressured to respond, pause and ask yourself, does this person deserve a piece of my inner world? Or are they just addicted to the version of me that never says no? If it's not a clear and powerful yes, then it's a strategic no. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's not ego, it's sovereignty. And if these words sting, good. Let them burn through the parts of you that were trained to obey, to serve, to self-abandon. And if you're ready to dismantle the version of you that was built to be used, type in the comments, "My predictability is my enemy," and subscribe not to follow another voice, but to fortify your own. Because from this moment on, you are not their solution. You are not their convenience. You are a man in control. Part 2. Psychological energy. Are you spending it or being robbed? In every war, the smartest generals don't fight every battle. They don't waste arrows on shadows. They calculate. They conserve. They strike with precision. Why? Because their deadliest weapon isn't the sword. It's the energy to wield it at the right moment. Now bring that into your own life. Every conversation you engage in, every insult you respond to, every little emotional fire you rush to put out for others, costs you something. And most men don't even realize they're being robbed. They wake up exhausted, not from hard work, but from exposure. Exposure to people who drain them, to habits that leak energy, drop by drop, until nothing remains but resentment and regret. Machiavelli wouldn't call it burnout, he'd call it strategic failure. Because the man who wastes his power on trivial battles will have nothing left when the real war begins. Make no mistake, your energy is not infinite. It is currency, and who you give it to is a direct reflection of who you've allowed to command you. Carl Jung once said, "Every thought, every emotion draws from a limited reservoir." But Machiavelli would go even further. He wouldn't just protect that reservoir. He'd weaponize it. He'd use it like a king uses gold. Not to be generous, but to gain advantage. You think you're being noble, showing up for everyone, responding to every cry, defending yourself in meaningless debates. But here's the truth. Every time you react, you're being mapped, profiled, predicted. Manipulators don't need to defeat you. They just need you to waste yourself, and you do it willingly. In the name of kindness. In the name of being a good man. But what you're really doing is surrendering your kingdom. Machiavelli would never tolerate that. He'd command, withdraw your energy from the useless. Let fools destroy themselves in the silence you no longer break. Because when you stop giving them what they crave, your time, your attention, your emotional labor, you become dangerous. They'll call you cold. They'll call you distant. They'll call you selfish. Let them. Because now you're no longer predictable. You're no longer easy to provoke. You've become unreadable. And the man who cannot be read, cannot be ruled. You were never meant to pour yourself out like a public fountain. You were built to guard your fire like a fortress. Because when your energy becomes sacred, your presence becomes rare, and rare is always powerful. So here's your command. Stop defending yourself in pointless battles. Start conserving yourself for the real ones. The next time someone demands your reaction, pause and ask, do they want resolution, or do they just want control? If the answer isn't clear, default to silence, not because you're weak, but because you're done being played. If this hits you in the chest, type in the comments, "My energy feeds no fool," and subscribe, not to add more noise to your life, but to build ruthless clarity, because from here on out, you don't react, you calculate, you conserve, you rise. Part 3. Silence. And the collapse of the mask. Silence is not retreat. It is not surrender. And it sure as hell is not weakness. Silence is a setup, a trap wrapped in stillness. A weapon wielded by those who have stopped dancing to the noise of others. Machiavelli never saw silence as absence. He saw it as camouflage. He wrote, "The wise man does not need to lie. He only needs to withhold." Because in a world where everyone is shouting, the man who says nothing becomes the most dangerous. When you go silent, you disrupt the script. You remove yourself from their expectations. You become unreadable. And what people cannot read, they cannot control. The same people who once praised your kindness, your availability, your agreeable nature, begin to squirm when you no longer play your part. They used to call you kind. Now they call you cold. They used to call you dependable. Now they say you've changed. But hear this, they were never complimenting your character. They were complimenting your compliance. They didn't admire you. They admired their grip on you. Machiavelli understood this game better than anyone. He knew silence doesn't confuse the strong. It terrifies the manipulative. Because silence doesn't calm the room. It exposes it. It shatters the mirror. And those who once used you to reflect their comfort are now forced to see only themselves. Most can't handle what stares back. They loved you as long as you were predictable, as long as you were their echo, their rescuer, their distraction. But when you go silent, they are forced to face the emptiness they were hiding behind your presence. And that is where the mask collapses. The smiles vanish. The roles crumble. The same people who once cheered you on will now accuse you. They'll label your silence as arrogance, your boundaries as betrayal, your growth as abandonment. Let them. Because in that moment, you are not watching them turn on you. You are watching their illusion unravel. Carl Jung called it the breakdown of the persona, the false self we wear to be liked, accepted, safe. But Machiavelli, he'd say, only when the mask falls does the game begin. Because now you're not who they want you to be. You are who you choose to be. Not polite, not predictable, but powerful. You no longer explain, you no longer soothe, you no longer respond just to make others feel safe. Let them misread your silence. Let them spin. Let them dig their own psychological graves, trying to decode a stillness that no longer serves them. Because the greatest exposure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from withdrawal. So here is your internal command. Do not explain. Do not chase. Do not clarify. Let the silence speak. Let it echo in the void they used to fill with your obedience. Let it rattle those who only valued you when you were performing. And if this speaks to the part of you that's finally done with the act, type in the comments, "My silence is the end of their illusion." And subscribe, not to fit in, but to redefine who you are without the mask. Because now you don't play the game. You command it. Part 4. The Power of Silence. The art of not reacting. In a world addicted to noise, silence is rebellion. And in the game of power, silence is dominance. When you stop reacting, you don't just avoid chaos. You control it. You flip the board. You walk away from the rules they tried to bind you with. Suddenly, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how to trigger you. They don't even know if you're still playing the game. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not always necessary to strike. Sometimes, not moving at all is the most terrifying strike of all. Because when you withhold your response, you don't back down. You build pressure. You create a vacuum that forces the other side to talk more, reveal more, panic more. And in that panic, they give themselves away." Most people are trained to react instantly to every insult, every provocation, every emotional hook. Because the moment you react, they own you. You're no longer sovereign. You're being pulled by invisible strings. But when you resist, when you say nothing, They collapse under the weight of their own projection. Manipulators hate silence. They can't use it. They can't twist it. They can't control it. You don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't need to win argument, because silence kills their narrative. It unravels their manipulation without you lifting a single finger. Carl Jung said, "Silence connects you to your true self." But Machiavelli, he'd take it further. He'd say, silence disconnects your enemies from themselves. It turns their aggression inward. It lets them self-destruct in the quiet you left behind. This isn't passivity. This is siege warfare. Psychological dominance. Through stillness. They spend, you conserve. They attack. You observe. They burn out. You sharpen. So here's the rule. He who speaks first, exposes first. He who reacts, loses the frame. But he who holds his silence owns the moment. Let the silence stretch. Let it breathe. Let their own words echo back at them with no reply to hide behind. Because in silence, you reveal everything, while showing nothing. If this strikes a chord within you, type in the comments, "My silence is my power." And subscribe, not to add to the noise, but to master the art of stillness. Because from this point forward, you don't react. You rule. Part 5. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You only owe yourself peace. You were trained to explain yourself, to apologize for your silence, to justify your solitude, to defend your boundaries as if they were crimes. You were taught to make others comfortable, even if it meant betraying your own peace. But Machiavelli would call that a fatal mistake. He wrote, "He who justifies every step invites others to question every move, and once they feel entitled to question it, they never stop." Every time you say, "I'm sorry I didn't reply, I've just been overwhelmed," you reinforce a dangerous illusion that you owe them an explanation for living life on your own terms. But hear this clearly, you don't. You never did. Your silence is not an offense. It is a declaration. Your boundaries are not cold. They are the architecture of your self-respect. Your detachment is not arrogance. It is the recalibration of a man who finally understands how much he gave, and how little was ever returned. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim something sacred, authority over your own narrative, because when people grow used to your explanations, they stop respecting your instincts. They begin to expect a reason for your every breath, and when you stop offering it, they panic, they question, they spin stories, but that's their discomfort, not your obligation. You are not here to soothe everyone's fears. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about who gets access to your energy. Machiavelli understood this with surgical clarity. He wrote, "A ruler must choose between being loved and being respected. Only one of those ensures order. Too many men choose to be loved, and in doing so, they become servants to emotion, slaves to perception. They give their energy to everyone, except themselves. But clarity is a sword, and silence is its sheath. You wield both the moment you stop defending your peace. So the next time someone says, 'You've changed,' smile, not because they're wrong, but because they finally noticed. You're not here to be accessible. You're not here to be explainable. You're here to evolve. And evolution doesn't come with a permission slip. So let them wonder. Let them misinterpret. Let them write stories to explain a version of you they no longer have access to. Because every man who rises into sovereignty must first face the guilt of no longer being available to those who only ever loved his obedience." If you feel that shift in your soul, if you know this transformation is happening in real time, then carve this into your identity. I owe no explanations for protecting my peace. And subscribe, not to follow, but to fortify the man you're becoming. Part 6. The pain of withdrawal and the rebirth of power. There's a kind of pain most men never speak about. It doesn't come from betrayal. It doesn't come from failure. It doesn't even come from loss. It comes from the silence. The silence that follows your withdrawal. You stop replying. You stop explaining. You step out of the roles they cast you in. And suddenly, the noise fades, and the stillness begins. At first it feels like freedom, then it feels like death, then it hits you, the loneliness, the emptiness, the unfamiliar quiet where their expectations used to live. You begin to question yourself. Did I go too far? Was I too cold? Did I just destroy the bridges I might one day need? But Machiavelli would meet you in that silence, with something colder than comfort. He'd say power is not born in applause. It is born in isolation. And isolation is not punishment. It is purification. This isn't the pain of losing people. This is the pain of losing the version of you that needed their approval, that craved their validation, that stayed in rooms just to feel useful. You're not suffering from solitude. You're suffering from withdrawal. Withdrawal from the addiction of being needed, from the comfort of being expected, from the illusion of being liked. Because every time you said yes to avoid tension, you said no to yourself. Every time you showed up to prove you're good, you stepped further away from what made you powerful. Machiavelli wouldn't soften this moment. He'd name it for what it is. A strategic death. The kind of death that precedes rebirth. Because until the obedient version of you dies, the sovereign one cannot emerge. So let it hurt. Let it burn. Let the echoes of your old self scream in protest. Because the ache you feel right now, it's not weakness, it's detox. And in that void, something far more dangerous is rising. A man who no longer needs permission. A man who does not explain. A man who disappears and returns as his own force of nature. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of integrating your fragmented self into something whole. But Machiavelli would frame it differently. He'd say this is a transfer of power, not given to you but taken by you, from the hands of those who once fed on your need to be seen. It will be uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural. But so does every great transformation. The lion is not born in a crowd. He is born in solitude. And he roars, not for attention, but because he finally remembers his own voice. So don't run from the pain. Stand in it. Let it cut. Let it cleanse. Let it crown you. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of them. And in doing so, you found yourself. If you feel this shift rising from deep within you, then carve this into your identity. My solitude is my rebirth. And subscribe. Not to be found, but to become. Part 7. The true power of selective presence. How distance creates value. There is a difference between being seen and being remembered. Between being around and being respected. Between being liked and being valued. Most men confuse attention with influence, but Machiavelli saw deeper. He wrote, "The prince who is always seen becomes ordinary, but the one who controls when and how he appears becomes unforgettable. Your presence used to be constant, predictable, always accessible, and that made you convenient, not powerful. Because what is always available loses its mystery. What is always accessible loses its edge, and what is always present becomes invisible. You showed up before they even noticed you were gone. You replied before they even missed you. You explained yourself before they even questioned you. And in doing so, you trained them to treat you like background noise in your own life. But here's what no one ever told you. Scarcity creates value. Distance, when intentional, is power. You don't need to disappear. You need to become strategic with your presence. When you speak too often, your words lose weight. But when you speak less, every sentence lands like an earthquake. When you're everywhere, you become noise. But when you appear only when it matters, you become signal. Machiavelli would call this calculated absence, not to play games, but to build gravity. He would say, let them feel your absence, so they remember the cost of your presence. This isn't manipulation, it's asset protection. Your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional bandwidth. These are not donations, they are investments. And not everyone qualifies. So here's the new standard. Not everyone gets a reply. Not everyone gets an explanation. Not everyone earns your presence. The more they assume you'll show up, the more you must challenge that assumption. Because when they no longer know where you stand, that's when they begin to feel your power. Think of gold, its value isn't in how bright it shines. It's in how rare it is, how protected it is, how difficult it is to reach. So ask yourself, why should your presence be any less valuable? Why should your attention be handed out like a free sample? The man who is always seen is soon forgotten. But the man who chooses when to enter, how to speak, and when to vanish, becomes a presence they fear to waste. This is not arrogance. This is sovereignty. This is the behavior of kings, of men who don't exist for convenience, but for consequence. From now on, your attention is currency. Your presence is leverage. Your absence is a reminder. So with every message, every meeting, every interaction, ask, is this person earning my presence, or expecting it by default? And if you feel that shift rising within you, write it in the comments. My presence is a privilege. And subscribe, not to be seen everywhere, but to become the man who is remembered everywhere he is not. The Machiavellian Code: power, silence, and strategic presence. What you've just walked through was not a guide to being liked. It wasn't self-help. It wasn't therapy. It was war. A psychological war. A war between who you were trained to be and who you must now become. Machiavelli never promised peace. He promised clarity. He didn't teach comfort. He taught control. He didn't praise kindness without power. He valued power disguised as kindness, and withdrawn, the moment kindness became a leash. If you've been paying attention, you now understand the one law that governs everything. A man who does not command himself will be commanded by others. And command begins with one act: withdrawal. Withdrawal from weakness, from over-explaining, from emotional servitude, from being the man who shows up for everyone but himself. When you withdraw, you create distance, and in that distance, you become mysterious, unreadable, uncontrollable. That's the foundation of real power. Because when you no longer respond on demand, they don't just wonder where you went, they wonder what they lost. When you stop justifying your choices, you don't just build boundaries, you raise standards. When you stop chasing clarity in others, you begin building certainty within yourself. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining your evolution to people who only ever knew your obedience. Machiavelli would remind you, power is never granted. It is taken. And it is sustained not by force but by calculation. You are not here to be emotionally available. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to be accessible. You are here to rule your inner world like a kingdom. To decide who enters, who stays, and who never gets a key again. This is the Machiavellian man. He does not explain. He does not react. He does not beg to be seen. He speaks when it serves him. He vanishes when it strengthens him. And he returns only when the terrain favors his move. Your new life does not begin with applause. It begins in silence, and it ends in dominion. Not over others, but over the one thing that was always stolen from you, your self-command. So from this moment forward, let them gossip. Let them speculate. Let them miss you. But you withdraw, you observe, and you return only when it serves you. Because as Machiavelli knew, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And now, you are